Running a call center is tough. Leading a sales team is a challenge. Luckily, your hosts know what it takes to succeed. What you can expect from your two guides? Conversations that won't be overly scripted, definitely not salesy or boring, just filled with as much value as possible. Each week, Jason and Oliver will bring you topics to help scale your team, increase profits, and actually feel like you are winning. So, if you are ready to up your game and become the best in the business, tune in, take notes, and be prepared to learn. And here they are with another episode of Call Center Confidence. It's Jason Cutter and Oliver Catt.
And here we are. Happy September 1st, 2021. It's Wednesday, as always. This is episode 17, week 17. Mr. Oliver is here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Mr. Cutter. Week 17, September 1st. That means we've been going for like nearly 3 or 4 months now. I'm losing track. It's crazy. And we're talking about the best and hottest topics ever.
4 months in, over 4 months, and it feels like it's flown by. And obviously, for people watching this live, hello, welcome, Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt. We're glad that you're here, whether it's LinkedIn, it's Facebook, YouTube. If you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, leave a comment, say hello, tell us where you're coming from, where you're watching, and just let us know that you're there. And then as we go through this, your questions, your comments relative to our topic, which is currently a mystery, but we'll talk about that in a second. If you're catching the replay of this on any platform, if you leave comments, we'll get those as well. So it's always fun to see what people hear and think after the fact, and then we can reply to those. And then obviously, if you want to listen to the podcast, it's available everywhere. And so there's quite a few hours of us talking about call center and your confidence and success in running a call center. So if you like listening to us talk and you're looking for, 16 hours worth of content to listen to, tune in. You can download it everywhere that podcasts are sold. And I think that pretty much covers the exciting bits, like the machine that we've built, this part here to help people with their call center confidence, no matter what your role is in your organization.
No, 100%. I think you got it all down and locked down there with everything. Social media, Instagram, podcasts, it's happening. Looking at where people are tuning in from right now, we've got the UK, we've got the US, we've got Philippines tuning in. That's on the website, plus many other people across LinkedIn, Facebook. So we're reaching the global market, and that's what we want, guys. So look, if you're not listening live, then make sure you subscribe to those podcasts or check out our Instagram page, which I've been very lax in updating recently. First 6 episodes are there. I'll get back to it when I get a chance. Other than that,
And I think the important thing, which I was going to mention as we rolled into this, especially as people are tuning in, your friend, Mr. Rich Edge, posted it in the comments, is a very happy birthday to you. I celebrate you and your birth, obviously, making this show possible. Otherwise, it would be Call Center Confidence with Cutter and who knows who. So thanks to you and your birth, you're here. Thank you for that. And I'm excited to you want to spend an hour of your birthday in this community. So thank you.
Absolutely. Hey, that's what it's all about. We committed to Wednesdays, come rain or shine, right? So birthdays make no difference. But thank you very much, Mr. Rich Edge. As always, thank you. I think you even stuck it on my Facebook page this morning. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. But where are we heading today, Jason? Lots of hot topics today.
So I kind of set this up every time. We're following this journey. If this is the first time tuning in, or you're a long time watcher or listener of our podcast, we've been taking this journey from the very moment you're thinking about getting salespeople or people into your call center sales environment, from onboarding to training to recruiting, compensation plans. We've talked about it all. We've talked about a lot of it up to this point. Last week, we were covering success with QA. So if you have a quality assurance or some kind of compliance department, make sure to check out week 16, episode 16, where we dove into that and gave our experiences and tips and ideas, best practices for success in that realm. And so now let's play out the scenario as we move through this evolution or progression of your call center team. Is your salespeople they're doing what they're supposed to be doing at some level, hopefully amazing, and they're enrolling clients and producing new customers and revenue for you, which is amazing. That's the whole point of a business. And everybody is doing well. People are getting enrolled, people are signing up, customers are paying, and then customers maybe are unhappy. Maybe customers want to leave your organization. Maybe they don't like what they bought. At one end, maybe they felt misled. Hopefully not. At the other end, maybe they were just confused. Maybe they changed their mind. And so then the conversation of retention comes in and keeping your customers. And while this may not always be something that sales wants to talk about, I think call center leaders need to talk about this, are always aware of this. And I think there's a ton, because you and I are both sales focused, more sales leaning call center leaders and consultants. Yep. Is how what part also does sales have as a responsibility, and leaders responsibility for retention, which may be seen as like that's somebody else's problem, like retain the clients, versus my job is just to sell them. And so that's the bomb that we want to drop today and cover in this wide range of because it's important. I was told many times by many mentors in the past, a deal saved is a deal earned, right? Like you put in all this effort to enroll a new client, new customer, and then you let them cancel or quit or leave, right? It takes so much effort to get a new client. For every client that you can save or keep as a part of your organization, it's worth, way more than trying to go after a new one. So there you go.
100%. Yeah, there's
where you want with all of that.
So much to talk about. I mean, also not to mention as well, I mean, theoretically from a sales perspective, if you're selling a product, we also got to talk about, the customer retention who decides to cancel their order before it arrives. Is it sales responsibility to win it back as well? There's lots of different angles in there. So salespeople, don't just pass it over to you. Your customer experience team, you got to make sure it goes live. You got to make sure that product is delivered and transacting or selling or working in that person's life, because you don't just want to drop a sale in the top of the funnel and hope that it comes out the other end. And that's where we're going today. So there's so much to talk about there. So let's start from the beginning of that kind of customer retention piece, because I think it's key to understand it from every different angle, whether it's customer experience, whether it's, somebody in technical support retaining that customer because they've had so many technical difficulties. Where do you think one of the most important parts of customer retention really sits? And I'll tell you for why, and this is for me, especially why customer retention is a big thing. My first ever job in a call center was in retentions. Working for a telecoms business back in early to mid to late 2000s, somewhere like that. So lots of ways to look at this. So what about you, Jason? Where do you think it starts?
Well, I think it has to start with the progression, like we talked about, with the transaction, with who's dealing with the customer first and setting things up. And so that would be sales. I think in any organization that wants to succeed at the customer revenue retention game and everything that's included in that, what it takes is being very mindful of the end result you want, which is a long-term client. Whether it's a one-time purchase and you want them to be happy, maybe refer other people, or it's an ongoing service with some kind of monthly reoccurring revenue or annual reoccurring revenue or contract or agreement, and you want the most lifetime value that is possible from each successful, happy customer that you enroll and have a part of your organization. And then I think that has to start with sales and how sales is setting up that customer, that potential lead to being a client, how they're being set up, what the expectations are that are being set, and what sales is doing to start that relationship off in the right way. And I think because everything is relationships, right? When we talk about sales, selling somebody, persuading somebody to buy, if you're in a desk, in a cubicle, in a call center, is similar in ways that you would approach and build a successful relationship and close the deal, if you will, with even, let's say, a personal relationship or a romantic relationship. You want somebody to go out on a date with you. It's about doing things the right way, being authentic, being who you are, setting the right expectation, and not having any surprises afterwards. And I think that's one of the things, like, we can all relate, where you meet somebody, and this is on the personal side, but it relates to sales, where you meet somebody and it sounds really good. They're saying all the right things. And then you spend some more time with them and you're like, wait a second, where was that person? That person I thought I was starting to hang out with is totally different than this person now. What happened? Feels like a bait and switch. Feels like you got lied to. And I feel like salespeople, unfortunately, do that a lot, where they're excited, they want to close the deal, they'll say whatever it takes to get that customer to sign on the dotted line, to swipe their credit card, to make the payment, and they don't really think about the long term, what's going to happen later on down the road. And sales has to be responsible. And then there's the part of what you said, which is, okay, who has to retain this person, and how do you affect sales compensation plan? So what do you think about that side, with the fact that the relationship needs to start out on like a truthful, expectation?
Look, there are so many companies out there at the minute that work with the premise of slightly mis-selling, slightly doing it. And it's not maybe nothing intentional. It just kind of happens, and it happens from time to time. I think one of the great things about being honest and being open from the beginning is working with the right people and working with the right team. A client that I'm working with at the moment, ironically, is adamant about making sure that the transition from sale to account manager to live is a solid process all the way through. So it goes from the sales team handing over to customer experience, then customer experience outbounding that brand new sale to welcome them on board, to tell them their products in the pipeline, that it's going to be going here soon. You're going to be able to have access to your new product very shortly. And I think that is something that really, really, really makes a difference. And when you said that a minute ago, that really resonates, because there are companies that want to do that. There are companies out there that really want to achieve that process. But I think sometimes people get lost in that motion. People get lost in that process. And I think it's going to take time for a lot of people to kind of fix their end-to-end process. And it's not everyone. There are a lot of companies out there that do it very, very well. And I think we can learn from those types of companies how to improve that process. And one of the things I'm really excited about with this new client is especially making sure that we go from A to B with no hiccups. We don't lose that customer in the sales process. And most importantly, the point you said there is the salesperson is honest and upfront. A comment from that call specifically this morning was even made by the client saying, hey, look, I don't care if it takes an extra 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes on that initial sales call to explain the entire sales process and what's going to happen next. And for me, I was just like, hallelujah. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. I mean, is that your thought process? Is that what you want to see?
Yeah, that sounds like a dream client or company to be working with from my experience and what I've seen. Where, a lot of times, and here's the challenge, is that salespeople in a hurry, they want to get the deal done, or salespeople have had bad experiences. This is one thing that occurs a lot, and you explain some features or you explain the process. And then that new client, right as they're about to sign, or they just signed up, says, you know what, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to go through that much work. I don't want any part of this. So what happens is that salesperson, this happens all the time, right? This is a little sidebar, but that salesperson builds up this idea and says, wait a second, if I explain all these things, I lose deals. So that equals this. And now I don't want to do it. It's right. Like if I'm cooking and my hand slips and I touch the hot burner, that hurts. I don't want to cook anymore. Right? Like that's what goes on in our brain. And then that's what happens. And so the rep holds back, or the manager holds back, and they don't want to do that. And I think it's so important to set that expectation. Again, you got to fight that instinct, especially if you're managing and leading salespeople. Fight their instinct that it's better to just not explain a lot of stuff and let it work out versus explain and give the right expectation, while at the same time knowing the right people will appreciate that. And if that scares off the wrong people, I promise you they would have been bad customers or very surprised or very angry later on. You wouldn't have wanted them anyway, right? Oh, you're mute. Oh, can't hear you, birthday boy.
Sorry, I'm muted.
I'm sure it was amazing.
It was. I was laughing to myself. I said, look, my client's actually listening from YouTube right now. He's even said, I'm listening. Oliver is talking about me. And that was it, because I think that sends the right message to people. But I get where you're coming from, that people are afraid to say that. And it's when it comes to things like, compliance scripts or sales processes or, hidden charges and things like that. When you put something like that in there, it can turn a very happy customer into a negative customer. But the thing is, I think the point you're trying to talk about, and I think where you're really trying to hit here, is that that sale is made. Customer A is happy. They've gone, oh wow, Jason's just sold me the best product in the world. But the point you're alluding to is 3 months later, when something changes in that product, because you know what, they didn't read the T's and C's in the fine print or hear it from me on the phone, and then all of a sudden they're on the phone going, whoa, you lied to me. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't happen to everybody, and from a small percentage of things, some customers just slip through the net, and that's the way it is. And then that customer's going to churn. That customer's going to go somewhere else, or if they're in contract, they'll wait till they're out of contract and then they will leave you. I think for me, it's all about building it up on the right relationship from the very beginning, being open and honest. And that is what companies need to do these days. I think people are in the process where they're happy to switch their provider for whatever it might be, or they're happy to leave, one SaaS product for another SaaS product, because somebody's kind of not put a clause in there that should have been in there at the wrong time. And people will leave you for the smallest amount of money. I've switched a platform in a company. It was a big company, 1,000 people were using this platform, and the saving was $500 a year. And I switched because I was getting bad service from that client. That's $500 a year. Now, for me, all right, do you know what? That came out of my budget, but I could reallocate that budget somewhere else in the pipeline. But $500 for a big company is a drop in the ocean.
Sure. That makes sense. And I think it really comes down to that. And I like the example you use too. And sometimes this is too extreme for some companies, but we're talking about retention here, right? So just to recap, we're going on this conversation. We're talking about salespeople setting expectations. Fundamentally, the goal here is helping you with your customer retention. So first, we got to have customers. You want to set them up in the right way. But like you were talking about with the story about, Dan, who's tuning in as well, is that, that handoff is so valuable if you can do it. No matter what you're selling, like every industry I've seen and that I've worked with, there is a way to do a handoff that will make it successful, instead of just being like, I sold them, good luck, right? And having this wall that occurs mentally, emotionally between these departments versus doing that. And I think that's important, is to be able to physically hand off the relationship, mentally hand off the relationship, mentally set the expectations and do that. And I think there's a couple of big things to have for people to keep in mind, right? If we're talking about building a amazing retention platform or capability within your organization, I think one of the biggest things, and I'm sure you agree with me on this, Oliver, is that, it starts with setting the right expectation in sales. And it also includes being understanding and empathetic to what your new customer went through. So one is, maybe they called in, maybe you called them. They may or may not have been thinking about buying at that time, maybe out of the blue, maybe they were thinking about it, researching it. I've dealt with ones where it's like kind of an out of the blue sale. Once it ends, they're confused, they're overwhelmed. They know what they signed up, but they don't know everything that's going on. I'm not going to blame the attention span thing, but I've dealt with some sales cycles that are 30, 45 minutes, an hour long. You cover a lot of stuff in that. And then as a company to go like, I gave them all the disclosures, I set out the expectations. Why don't they remember it? Why do they keep calling back? It's like, they're human, right? Like, they're absolutely, watch a movie and then wait a week and then think about every detail of that movie that you enjoyed and see if you can remember every scene and every piece of dialogue that occurred. It's not going to happen. And so if you want to be successful at customer retention, it's also understanding that they're human, your customers, and then reiterating these things, reminding them, having a reminder call, an email, a packet in the mail, things to solidify like, hey, here's the things we covered. Hey, here's what you should expect, instead of like, I just assume you were listening.
But that's the thing, and I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls. And I don't even think it's always just it's your sales teams at that point. It goes into your customer experience teams as well, because one of the last clients I worked with a couple of years ago, they were selling a product, but you could buy it on like a payment plan or a layaway plan. And one of the things that they did was, they'd say, hey, your final payment is due on this date. This is where it's going to come out. You need to make sure you have money in your account, et cetera, et cetera. And the amount of people that would then have to be phoned by our kind of collections team to say, hey, you missed your payment. Oh, I didn't know I was due a payment then. But they would have been, as you say, this is the perfect point, because in the compliance script, you are saying to them, this is the date, you fill in the blank. This is when it's coming out. But as you say, all they're thinking about is their product. They're thinking about using it. They're thinking about that. I agree with you 110%. 110%. I think that is one of the biggest, most foremost points of making sure you drill down on the key information. You make sure they understand it. And sometimes, look, you may sound stupid on the phone, but if it's something important, get them to repeat it back to you. That's how you get them to understand. And then, you don't end up, I was going to say a wrong word there, but you don't end up annoying your customer because you've misled them, or you've not solidified the information you need to solidify in their head,
It just so you know, it's your birthday. You can say whatever you want on our show, I think. I don't know. Maybe not anything.
We fill it in with beeps and
we'll just bleep it out for the podcast, or we'll just put that it's explicit and content, and then just mark that if you really want. So you let it fly. It's the authentic side, right? Like if you're gonna be authentic, it's got to be you. Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, I think one of the things, if you again want to be successful building a retention program that works effectively, is remember that once your customer becomes a customer, the biggest thing to keep in mind is they see that their problem is now solved. They had a problem or they had a goal. They signed up from you. They bought from you. That problem is now solved. Even if it's not, even if this is the beginning, right? You joined the gym. Okay, cool. Now I'm in shape. No, this is where the fun begins. Like, you just signed up. But in their mind, that's checking the box and closing the loop, going, okay, I joined the gym. That's all I needed to do. Or I signed up for my insurance, or I signed up for help with my credit cards, or I signed up for help with my energy. And cool, now my job is done. I checked that box in my mind. And for most organizations, service-based, that's when the work begins, and you got to keep people engaged and make sure they're still connected with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So, we look at that, and, you have that entire end-to-end process. You have that part in place. What do you think is something when you get the angry customers calling service that want to leave, that want to cancel your product, that want to change your product? Where would you go with something like that? Because you've now got to turn an unhappy customer into a happy customer. And this is, you're not just dealing with somebody who's been given misinformation. They've already got that preconception that they are leaving you. They've already got that notion in their head. They no longer want your product. That's a tough one.
Yeah. I think it's really tough. And obviously we're going to speak in generalities here on the Call Center Confidence show, because every vertical is different. Every conversation, every person that you're dealing with is different. For anyone who wants specific ideas or concepts or things like that, definitely email us, info@callcenterconfidence.com. Because we both, for anybody watching or listening, Oliver and I have worked in many different industries. So like everything is different. What you say to this one type be different than this.
Agreed.
Fundamentally, universally, like I think there's a couple of big things. One is this goes back to the empathy side and understanding your customer and understanding humans, is that everybody, I'm going to say everybody by the time they've bought from you, and then by the time they go into the retention, but by the time they bought from you, they've had a bad experience buying from someone else and buying something, or hearing horror stories, or watching movies like Boiler Room or Wolf of Wall Street and thinking that salespeople are shady and that they can't trust companies, right? And so the problem is that most people don't buy because their walls are too high. Once they buy, they're just looking for how they made a mistake, where the gotcha is, right? Like, okay, so I signed up for this thing. When are they coming for me? When are they going to get me? Like, I drove the car off the lot. When is this thing kind of just spontaneously combust? Like, what did they do to me? And so that's what people are expecting. So you've got to understand that in retention, that people have had bad experiences.
Yep.
It may not be you that did anything wrong, but they have this lens of the world that maybe I signed up and who knows what happened. And so I think part of it is just understanding that if you are a well-run organization and you have a CRM and you have a well-trained sales team that actually puts notes in their CRM, then when it comes to retention, what you should have in your toolbox as a retention specialist is why they signed up, what they needed, what their issue was, what you were trying to solve, no matter what it is. Again, you could be helping them switch cell phone carriers, but if there's enough notes in there, you should know and be able to tie it back to what the issue was that switching or signing up solved. And I think that's the key when it comes to retention. You can't just be like, well, you should stay with us because we're amazing. Like, no, nobody cares how amazing you are. Remember, they are the hero of their own story. And the best retention people I've ever seen go back to the basics and either ask them questions or pull up the notes and say, hey, when you signed up, here's the challenge. Here's what we were trying to do. Let's talk about that. Like, what did anything change? And kind of bring up what was important to them that they probably forgot in their scaredness.
Do you know what? I think that solves a big problem because information is power when it comes to something like that. Jumping back to my very first retention job, I was working for a telecoms company that sold phone and broadband to residential premises back in the UK. And it was one of the second or third largest telecom providers. On the phones, retentions, angry customers, left, right, and center. That's all we dealt with. Now, the point I want to make here is, as you say, the notes on the account were our weapon. You could go right back to that sales agent to see exactly why Jason signed you up in the first place. And it would be something like Jason signed up Bob because Bob wanted to save £5 a month, right? You know, his bills were going up on his old provider. This is why he's switching to us. Perfect. And this may be a year down the line. It may be 2 years down the line, 3 years, whatever. And it would be great because the customer would come in and say, look, you know, my bill's been creeping up. You promised me it was going to be cheaper. Well, you can go back and say, well, look, it is cheaper and it's still cheaper than X, Y, and Z. And ultimately, the only reason you're paying it is because inflation's got, and you could explain everything. And all of a sudden, you sounded knowledgeable. You sounded like you weren't just some Joe on the end of the phone trying to make a sale and get paid for retaining this customer. And if you can go back to that, then that is great. And as you say, the CRM makes a big difference in that. Dan making the comment, just go and give them £100 cash into their personal bank account. They might stay with you. Look, it is an option. Jason, you brought it up at the very beginning. You know, sometimes it is cheaper to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new one. And that was always the case with every company that I've worked with. You know, your marketing spend is always more expensive to acquire somebody new into your marketplace and retain that repeat business. Because when you've retained that business, your marketing's already done. You don't need to spend any more money. It's like a Facebook ad. If you already got somebody to click your Facebook ad, you've got their information. You do not need to pay for their click again. And I think that's a very key point, that if companies do have the ability to not sweeten the deal, not throw stuff in, it does go a long way. The only downside to that is that when your customer that you've just saved with a credit tells their friend and then tells their friend and then tells their friend, and then you've got everybody up going, I would like to cancel, please. And then you get to the point where you get some arrogant person who doesn't really want to save you because they've had a bad day. And they go, yeah, okay, no worries. And then they go, oh, no, I didn't mean it. Because you get people panicking because they've just called up for a credit. And you know, I'm funny, well, not funny, but it is a funny story. If I go back, and this was a call that will always stick with me. Some guy phoned up and they wanted to cancel their telecom services because they were going to get it cheaper elsewhere. Now, I explained to them they were in contract, they were going to be charged a massive termination fee. And then they kind of basically turned around and said, oh, well, my new provider is going to give that to me. I don't want this line. Why don't you want it? And they turned around and said, because the account holder has passed away. Now, ultimately, they wanted to switch provider, but they told me that the account holder had passed away, and this is why they wanted to switch. Well, I said, look, unless you send in proof, blah, 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 you can't switch your product out. You can't change it. It's a horrible thing to say if someone's passed away. You have to, because you need evidence of why somebody's switching in the first place. And this was the protocol in the company, that you need to provide evidence, and you send it to a certain team. And it just so happened we cancelled it the termination fee was applied to their account, and then once they sent in proof, the termination fee would be removed. An hour later, I just happened to be that person who gets that same person back on the phone who goes, okay, look, I called in an hour ago to cancel, claiming that I was dead. I'm not dead. And I've realized that I can't switch my line now, and they won't give me a credit to buy out my line. So I'm going to stay with you. Can I reactivate my line, please? And it was just something like that, because people just trying to pull a fast one. No one likes to pull a fast one.
Yeah, that is hilarious. Now I can see why that stuck with you. I'm like, how do you remember one particular call? But that makes total sense. And I think really, as a good retention person, it's really getting to the heart of why someone would want to cancel. Why do they want to switch, and how can you retain them? And I know that Dan, put in there about paying them 100 quid, and he's joking about that. It is a good strategy, but you even mentioned, which I appreciate, which is sometimes what that can do is that can condition people, like you're just bribing them to stay.
Yep.
And that what you have to offer is either not valuable enough, or you're desperate, or you're worried, or something is happening. Now, I think when the company is at fault, like, hey, we screwed up, we totally messed up your service, or whatever it is, that's on us. We're going to give you a credit. Here's a month free. I just had an experience like that with a internet provider who I will not explain here, because I don't want to take up the whole rest of the episode. Not that I don't want to bash them, because I think they're terrible, but I just don't want to take up the rest of our episode.
Why you've had sucky internet.
Yeah, that's why, if anyone notices if my internet sucks, it's still their fault. But but what they did in the beginning was they're like, hey, we totally screwed this up. We're not charging you for the next month and a half. And so that was great. And it didn't build up that conditioning in me. Is like, if I have a problem, I'll just call them and get free internet. It was like, they messed up, they claimed it, and it was great, right? And it worked out well. And so I think there's always that balance, because one of the challenges is retention people, if not careful, if you arm them with the free items or the credits or the things that they can give, if they don't fully understand the value to the whole business and the cost and the whole business metrics and why, how everything fits together, they might use those things too often, or not often enough, if they don't fully understand. So I think that's a balance. And like Rich just put in the comments, financial compensation is not a fix for poor customer service.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest things that I have seen when leading retention teams is looking at those financial incentives, whether there's credits, there are discounts, whatever that looks like, looking at the frequency, and then looking at those accounts and looking at what triggered that, and then looking ahead of the stream, upstream from that, and seeing what needs to be fixed, because that's like a symptom, right? Having to give out those incentives could be a symptom of, is sales setting the wrong expectation? Is operations or processing dropping the ball? Is customer service doing the wrong things? Is there not enough follow-up and touch points? Kind of like Rich mentioned in the chat a few minutes ago about, touch points that might be far and few between. And so look at the cause, not just the symptom, and see if you can address the cause, instead of, as I say, just putting Band-Aids on a shotgun wound. Like, okay, maybe we need to actually figure out the cause and then solve that.
I mean, you look at it, and as you say, look at the cause, get the underlying reason behind their intention to cancel. I mean, for example, if they're calling in because their price has gone up and they're not happy with the price that they're paying on their product, and then you offer them a 3-month discount, they're going to call back in 3 months again, because their price has gone back up to what it was as to why they were calling in the first instance. So as you say, you're putting on a Band-Aid, but at the same time, that might be a duration that retentions agent actually gets paid a commission for saving that customer. And then all of a sudden it just keeps, regurgitating that same cycle. And at the same time, if you're looking at something like a tool or a giveaway or a sweetener, as they're called, then, that is your metric that you should be monitoring. Are you monitoring your average cost per save per agent per day? And that would be a good metric to put in place, so that that's your cap. If you're speaking to 20 customers a day, your cap is $100 per person per day. So you've got $2,000 to spend. And then that way you can measure that and go through it on a weekly, monthly, or whatever basis. That might be a great tool to implement if you're looking at kind of putting in a metric to protect that. But then again, I've worked with companies before that don't offer any incentives for any kind of customer retention. They phone out and they say, hey, do you want the product or not? Because they've got that much of a brand reputation, because they've got that much of a great product that no matter who you are, somebody else is going to buy what you don't want because you haven't made your final payment. So, if they've only got a limited amount of these products every single month to give away, they will happily give it to someone else. And that's where brand rep comes in. But in that instance, you don't need to give anything away. You phone up and go, hey, Jason, I see you missed your final payment on this product. Do you want it or not? We'll give you a refund for what you paid so far, and we'll take that back.
Well, and I think when you do those sweeteners, or you do things like that, or even discounts on the sales side on the front end, you're potentially reducing the value in the client's mind of what they're paying for, and there's a balance, right? That's a case by case, sometimes business by business, and also customer by customer or scenarios. But you always want to be careful of that. I think you mentioned something super interesting, which I see some organizations do this well and some don't, or pay attention to this. You mentioned about a retention person getting their bonus or their KPIs being about that save or getting that bonus. They gave that person a discount for the next 3 months. That counts as a save. And then they're hitting their bonus and their metrics. Here's one interesting one as well. For anyone watching this or listening in on this, one of the biggest ones that I have found to track is actually the long-term retention of a save for that person, and almost like a clawback. So with sales, a lot of times with sales, you enroll somebody, and then if that person cancels, let's say within the first 3 months, sales loses credit for that. There's some kind of clawback. There's some kind of like, hey, you sold them, but they didn't stay. And so we're taking your commission back. For retention, it's about doing that same thing as well, because they could save someone today and promise the world just to get off the phone with them and not mark it as canceled. That person could call up tomorrow or next month. And do you have the proper tracking, analytics, and then mechanism within your compensation plan to then hold those retention specialists to actually saving deals, and not what I had one manager call the noodle save, which is just like this limp, flimsy noodle of a retention, which is, hey, you know what? Why don't you look through your documents some more? And I know you want to cancel, but look through those and call us back tomorrow if you still want to cancel. And then they mark it as saved. They're on the board. They're going to get that spiff for the day. Everything is good until that person calls back tomorrow.
But that goes back to the same point we made earlier, is about, sticking sales in the top of the funnel, throwing mud on a wall and seeing what sticks. Because, great, you got your save yesterday. You look good in the eyes of your sales department, but tomorrow I'm going to look bad because I get that person calling back and I get that phone call. And then all of a sudden I get a negative conversion rate because you didn't do your job in the first place. And that's a big thing that I see a lot of in contact centers. And there's a lot of kind of loopholes that not everybody is aware of. And don't get me wrong, most call center managers are aware of many of loopholes. And that's things like what they call selling on cancellation. So it's like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. You can cancel anytime. Just don't worry about it. Great, sell on the board. But it hasn't stuck. And we see it. I think Rich even made a point there. Sales needs to be sticky. It does need to stick. And that's one of the biggest things. But where do you stand on this? You make the sale, customer's happy, customer goes away. And let's say, for example, they're not going to receive their product for, 30 days, right? They then call in to cancel and they get me. Now, you're going to be paid on commission on your sale because that is going to go live further down the line. But maybe there's something you missed off, or maybe there's part of your job what you haven't done. I now retain that customer to make that customer go live. But I also get paid a retention commission as well. Where do you stand on that? Because obviously from your sales management days and everything else, there's a lot of companies that, they do have the tracking in place. And sometimes there are workarounds where maybe certain comment is swapped and changed out. I don't know. But at the same time, I know some people that split the commission between both people, but there's lots of different workarounds. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I think if we're talking about where you and I are both in sales and the person calls back in and gets you instead of me, the company needs to figure out how to handle that kind of scenario. If it can't come back to me, it's almost where it needs to be paid double commission, because I don't want to split my commission if I'm the salesperson if I didn't have a chance to retain them myself. Yeah. Like, to me, that might not be fair to me. If they called in, they didn't get transferred to me, you retained it, and now I've got to split my commission with you. Like that, I would debate that from a sales side. Now, from a management standpoint, obviously I'd want to build it where it gets back to the person. If I can't get it back to the person, then I might give like a retention credit to you, sales rep number 2, still give sales rep number 1 their full commission. It's going to cost me a little extra, but again, a bird in the hand is way better, and you're doing it. I think that's the key.
So you're saying a smaller commission to that?
Yeah, maybe like a quarter point or a half a point or whatever that looks like to the person who did that retention and just kind of took it that last, yard across the line. I think that's one way. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is, depending on how this is set up, if this was a thing that happened frequently, is I would have the metrics to track that, probably some disposition in the CRM and the phone system. Yep. And then understanding people are people. Again, people get confused. People forget what they signed up for. They don't remember all the rules, the TNC, the terms and conditions. And like, how many of those am I going to allow each salesperson to have per month out of their total deals? And then when is it excessive? When is it like humans are humans and they forget things? And when is it Bob sucks at setting expectations and 60% of his people call back to cancel before they even start in a month? I got a problem with Bob. And so actually being able to track that and go, okay, we're fine with 5% or 10% of these coming back, and we don't mind paying an extra commission to it. What do you think of that? That's
great. That's fantastic. I mean, two excellent points you raised there. The first one I want to touch on is how you're saying about the commission brackets, how you have the tracking and everything else in there. I worked for a client many years ago that actually worked very hard. It used to be manual. You used to submit forms for commission and things like that. And what they did, because I think there was a lot of crossover, is jumping back to this commission paid in arrears, they actually built into the system your commission, like your save. When you retain that customer, you save it, and that customer then has a marker in their CRM. And what happened was, if there was no other overrides on that marker 3 months later and that customer was still there, you got paid because that marker was in the CRM and it was automated. However, if that customer called back in 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 9 weeks later, and somebody new overrode that save marker, then that new person would get the commission and the older person wouldn't, because they hadn't done their job to retain that customer for at least 3 months. So that was a really great tool that they put in, and it was a homegrown CRM. They built it internally, and it was fully customized. I mean, obviously nowadays you get your CRMs off the shelf that can do this and program it yourself. But that was a really great tool that they were focused on putting in there. And the second point I want to raise is when you talk about having sales coming back into this original sales agent. If you can do that, then that's great, because they've already built that rapport with that person. They've already built that relationship. And if you can go back and say, hey, Bob, look, I've just been passed over from Jason. He said that you're thinking about canceling your order. We spoke about this 3 days ago, 4 days ago, however long it was, and we had a great conversation. What's changed your mind? And in that instance, I think, in my opinion, it changes some of that mindset as to why that customer's calling to cancel when they bought from you in the first place. And they can't fob you off, or they can't mislead the retentions agent, because it's coming back to you who sold in the first place. And I think those are two excellent points you brought up there.
Well, so I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We always get into the pattern in these shows. Like you raise a great point, then you ask me a question, and then we go back and forth. But I have one for you, and I think this is, I don't know. We could debate this one a lot. I'm also curious to hear what people who are watching this, tuning in, have to say, either live or during the replay. Where, you can answer it either way. Where should your retention people come from? what linear path or what line through the organization should lead to them being in retention? Because I don't know, you said you started in retention. That's a tough place to start. Most people don't do well starting getting punched in the face every day by angry customers. So that's not like the best. So either what path or where should they have been before doing retention, and or who makes for, or what skills does somebody need to have to be really good in retention?
I'm just going to go with one word, and that's previous experience in sales. Sales is where they need to be. Retentions is sales. It's a different form of sales, but it is sales. And that was one of the things that, when I stepped into that role, there were so many people that went, oh, but it's a customer service role. It's a customer service role. No, it's really not. You are selling to that person. You are changing their mind. You are influencing them to keep your product, to retain your product, especially now more than ever, because that person's already got the mindset that they want to leave you. So you've got to really not convince is the wrong word. I'll go back to influence. You've got to influence these people to do that. And I think it takes a strong-willed person, but they have to have a sales mentality and a sales background. And anybody, and I've worked with people over the years that turn around to me and say, oh, yeah, we'll just get some of the really good customer experience guys. No. You put your strongest salespeople on there, because we go back to what we said before. It's cheaper to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new one. And the fact is, if you can sweeten the deal, if you've got somebody who's got the gift of the gab, who can talk, who can sell product, then you've got the right person, because they go in there. And look, I hate to use this word, but I use it in every training session that I ever do. And whenever I'm training sales reps, I always go down this route of explaining this to them, that sales is a bespoke form of manipulation. And that's not to manipulate the situation. It's not to create a facade or anything like that. It's to make sure that when I say manipulate, it's to move things into the right position at the right time. Okay. You move this comment in here as they say this, you move that comment in there as they say that. And if you can use your skills to go in and out as and when you need to. And in my opinion, a salesperson, a strong salesperson, is the only person with that skill set to do that. Agree? Disagree?
Agreed. And the only change I would make to that is more of the emphasis on persuasion than manipulation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the only reason I say that is in the process of writing my book, Selling with Authentic Persuasion, I had to wrestle with that as well. And I've had a lot of people who think persuasion is also bad. But just to put some definitions to it, like manipulation, if you look at the definition, that's doing something to something else against its will. So like manipulating clay, manipulating wood, like it's like, I'm going to do this to you and I don't really care what happens to you. Yeah. Like it's not for your benefit, it's for my benefit. That's manipulation. Persuasion is, interestingly enough, more open-ended. It doesn't say positive intent or negative intent. It mostly just says, I'm going to persuade you. I want something. It may or may not benefit you. So it's a little more open. But either way, I know what you're saying is it's about getting that person to do that thing. Hopefully, if you're using your powers for good and not evil, for their benefit, right? That's the key. I completely agree about people coming from sales. One lineage I've seen is people who are in sales weren't great at sales, weren't killers, meaning they weren't out there like making the phone calls, hunting people down, doing the follow-up. They didn't have that outgoing killer instinct in the moment, but they had the ability to persuade.
Personality.
What's that?
Sorry, I apologize. I said it's not they don't have a cold calling type of mentality, but they have that inbound lead. Yeah, and they're not a hunter killer, right? As some people might want to use those, which I'm not a huge fan of that, but that kind of describes it well. But I've seen people who didn't have that, but they had ability to deal with people. People liked them. People would sign up. People would stay with the company for a long time. Maybe they didn't cut it in sales. They got moved to customer service. Customer service was good. They were a little overqualified because they knew how to persuade. Moved into retention. That was a good path. If somebody sucked at sales, then I agree with you. Don't want to put them there. I think you have to be really good in sales. There's also people who start in customer service. They're in customer service. They could do sales, but they think sales is dirty just because that's their impression of sales and what they as a customer. But retention, they're happy doing that. And I think that's the key. I will tell you this. This is what's interesting that I have found very effective
in every organization I've dealt with is when it's possible to do some cross training where you take salespeople and have them do retention for some period of time.
Yes.
And not just sit with retention, because I've always done that as part of the onboarding, like in the first month, is to have somebody actually sit with retention and listen to live calls and watch what happens. But if you can actually get them to do the job for some period of time, what happens every time I've seen it is that person spends any period of time with retention and they're a salesperson. They get back to their sales desk and they go, oh man, now I see why it's important to say this, or don't say this, or disclose this, or set this expectation. Like now I get it. And I want my deals to stick. Now I'm a better salesperson because I saw what happens when it doesn't go well. And I think that's the key. Have you ever set that up intentionally, like with teams? Or
do you know what?
Programs?
I wouldn't ever say it was intentional. It was when I remember we were doing some cross-scaling for a client and we were rotating the teams across. And we've kind of done that, and they've gone and sat through the sales channel. We've gone and sat with other people in other sales channels, for example, inbound, outbound, retention, web chat, all of those types of things. So they can understand the different elements, or even learn, because do you know what? We're gonna multi-skill everybody in case we've got sickness or absence or shrinkage or whatever it might be. I've seen it go like that because, as you say, they start to understand what they haven't seen before, what they haven't said before, and it does make a big difference. But I love what you were saying about the persuasion piece. I mean, look, if I had a copy of a book to hand right now, I would have held it up and gone, plug Jason's book. But no, I think in that instance, I think you're absolutely right. And I think when you start to see other people's pain points, their pinch points that they have to deal with, it does make a big impact. It makes a big difference to anybody, not just sales, not just retention, not, you throw a customer service into somebody who does maybe customer experience or something, pre-care versus aftercare. You start to see that part of the customer journey. And when you're exposed to that, things can make a difference. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think the more you can do that as an organization, we're talking about this perfect call center confidence machine and leader that we're helping everybody kind of either develop or fill in the cracks, or because this is what happens a lot with the people I talk to. People have done it for a long time and literally they've forgotten more things than other people even know. And some of this might be a reminder, but if you can get your salespeople to cross-train or just shadow every department outside of sales, it will make literally a more empathetic, more effective salesperson, because they'll go, oh, this is what marketing does. Oh, this is what billing does. Oh, this is what customer service is dealing with. Like they'll see the whole machine. And really it's like empathetic to like understanding everyone else and breaking down those walls. It will also help them see themselves as a part of a bigger organization. I see this so many times where a lot of people in departments, especially sales, they see themselves in this one part. They're like, all I do is sell, and then I don't even know what happens. Like, I'm not a part of this big machine. I'm here for the money. Where's my money? Where's my spiff? How do I win a TV? Like, just tell me this, right? People kind of get really focused, heads down. That's what we do as humans. We're just like living our life. The more you can expose somebody to the whole organization and operation, then they will feel like a part of something bigger that is making a difference, helping clients. Again, no matter what you're selling, you could be selling knives or vacuum cleaners. Like it's still helping people feel a part of it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And I think just a fantastic point you make there. And I think that's something that everybody should do. So if you're listening live, podcast, Instagram, wherever it may be, I say do exactly what Jason just said. That's my easy way of saying it. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Business exposure is critical.
Yeah, and all of that will help with retention. Again, going back to our topic today, because everybody, if you want to build up your retention, everyone's got to be helping customers row the right direction and be successful and set the right expectation. And when everyone understands what the whole machine is doing, then they can help their part with the retention. Yeah.
No, good stuff. And I think that's the perfect bombshell to wrap up today's session with, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Like, obviously, we're going to carry on this topic, and I think it will form part of many other sessions that we have to go on, whether you're listening live, whether you're listening on the podcast, Instagram, website, whatever it might be. Look, if you've taken anything away from today, or you want to get in touch and discuss your specific customer retention pain points, then reach out to us, info@callcenterconfidence.com. You can find the website and all of our contact information at callcenterconfidence.com. Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. 1st of September, episode 17, 18 coming next week, and we'll be announcing our topic very shortly, won't we?
We will. Again, happy birthday, Mr. Oliver. Thank you for spending this hour with us and everyone who is tuning in, and appreciate you. And we will catch everyone next week.
Yeah, take it easy, guys. And if you're not following us, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, follow those pages.